Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Imagine holding in your hand what seems to be an ordinary piece of copper from the mid-20th century, a small coin that millions of people once used in everyday transactions without a second thought, a coin that bought candy, gum, or even helped cover the cost of a loaf of bread, and yet in today's world this same little disc of history, specifically the 1951 wheat penny from the United States of America, has gained attention and shaken the numismatic world because of the astonishing value collectors and investors now attach to it. A face value of only 1 cent transformed into a jaw-dropping figure of $630 million, making it one of the most remarkable, most discussed, and most viral stories in the history of coin collecting, and the journey from obscurity to global fame lies in the unique blend of minting errors, accidental variations, rare surviving conditions, historical significance, and the powerful psychology of rarity that drives human desire to own something no one else can easily possess. And this is where the tale becomes truly extraordinary, for the San Francisco Mint in 1951 was not known for perfect consistency, and coins struck there occasionally displayed minor imperfections, but in the case of certain wheat pennies that rolled out during that year something more dramatic occurred, and experts and sharp-eyed collectors decades later began noticing anomalies that could not be dismissed, such as double-die obverse impressions where Lincoln's profile or the lettering around the rim appeared slightly shadowed as if stamped twice, or repunched mint marks where the S under the date looked layered due to multiple strikes, or even planchette flaws where the copper blanks themselves carried impurities that caused odd streaks or cracks to appear once pressed. And though any one of these quirks might seem minor, when combined in specific surviving examples they created a coin that went far beyond ordinary rarity, pushing into the realm of near-mythical status, and the excitement only grew when stories spread about specimens discovered with rotated dies, meaning the back of the coin was struck at an angle different from the front, giving it a twisted alignment that collectors immediately recognized as extremely valuable. And then there were the uncirculated conditions where coins were somehow preserved untouched, gleaming as if fresh from the press despite being over 70 years old, and when such pieces surfaced in auctions they fetched sums no casual observer would ever expect, shocking the financial press and creating buzz across social media platforms where discussions about old change suddenly became viral content, captivating audiences who otherwise never cared about numismatics, because the idea that a tiny wheat penny from 1951 could be valued at hundreds of millions was almost unbelievable. Yet here it was, happening in real time, backed by authentication, grading, and frenzied bidding wars between high-net-worth collectors eager to own what was now considered the crown jewel of American coinage history, and people began to ask why such a coin could command such figures, why something with face value of 1 cent could be valued higher than mansions, yachts, or works of art, and the answer lies in human fascination with error, scarcity, and stories that turn the ordinary into the extraordinary, for the wheat penny was minted in enormous numbers overall, but very few with the San Francisco Mint mark survived in flawless or error-rich form, making them like hidden treasures waiting to be uncovered. And the narrative of discovery itself adds fuel to the fire, because when ordinary people search through jars of old change passed down from grandparents, the dream that one of these coins might surface keeps the mystery alive, a modern-day gold rush tucked inside pockets and drawers. And collectors cherish that thrill of possibility, knowing that any coin that combines age, condition, error, and cultural resonance could become a once-in-a-lifetime find, and the 1951 wheat penny embodies all these elements, becoming a perfect storm in numismatic history, a coin not just collected but mythologized, and once the valuation of $630 million was reported it cemented itself as one of the most expensive coins ever recorded, rivaling legendary rarities like the 1933 St. Gordon's Double Eagle or the 1794 Flowing Hair silver dollar. Yet the fact that it is a humble penny makes it even more compelling, reminding the world that value is not always tied to material but to perception, rarity, and story. And experts analyze how the copper composition of that year also plays a role, as wartime changes in metals had only recently ended and some leftover planchets with odd alloys slipped into production, creating subtle variations in tone, luster, and strike that advanced collectors could distinguish, raising values even higher. And others point to die deterioration where tiny cracks or cuds formed on the dies, leaving raised lumps or lines on the coins that acted as unique fingerprints, making each error specimen essentially one of a kind. And as these anomalies were catalogued they added to the mystique of the 1951 sparking articles, YouTube videos, TikTok shorts, and endless discussions across coin forums and collector groups, spreading the story like wildfire until it reached mainstream audiences who were amazed at how something as simple as a penny could be worth more than entire corporations, and this virality in turn pushed demand further, creating a feedback loop where exposure drove curiosity, curiosity drove collecting, and collecting drove prices into the stratosphere. And while skeptics questioned whether such values could sustain, the truth is that the ultra-wealthy often seek symbols of exclusivity, and the 1951 rarest wheat penny in pristine or error-rich form became such a symbol, a tangible piece of history with a narrative unlike any other, making it a trophy asset, an investment, and a cultural artifact rolled into one. And for those lucky enough to own even a circulated example with noticeable errors, the knowledge that its story ties to one of the greatest valuations in history adds immeasurable sentimental and financial weight. And beyond the technicalities of minting and errors, the coin also holds cultural symbolism, representing the post-war era. In America, when optimism and rebuilding shaped national identity, so holding the coin feels like holding a piece of that spirit, and when combined with its scarcity and error patterns, it becomes almost a relic, treasured by those who see coins not merely as currency but as storytelling devices, tiny canvases of national history and artistry. And the tale continues to inspire treasure hunters who sort through rolls from banks, hoping lightning might strike twice, even though the known population of high-value specimens remains tiny, ensuring their exclusivity, and auction houses now treat any 1951 rarest wheat penny discovery as headline-worthy, drawing cameras, articles, and viral content, further cementing its place as one of the most famous coins in the world. And if you reflect on this story, it demonstrates not only the financial power of rarity but also the human need for discovery, connection, and legend, because while paper money fades and digital currency grows, coins like the 1951 rarest wheat penny endure as anchors to the past, teaching us that sometimes the smallest objects carry the largest stories. And this is why today, when people talk about the greatest finds in coin collecting history, the $630 million 1951 rarest wheat penny stands tall, forever remembered as the coin that turned a humble cent into an empire of value. So if you are fascinated by stories like this and want to continue exploring the mysteries of hidden treasures, coins worth fortunes, and tales that shock the world, make sure you like this video, share it with friends who would be amazed by the idea that a penny could be worth more than skyscrapers, and subscribe to stay connected with more incredible journeys into the world of rare coins and priceless discoveries. Next, 1952 wheat penny USA coin. Imagine holding in your hand a tiny coin that looks ordinary to most people but hides a story so incredible that it could change your life forever. A story tied to the legendary wheat penny 1952 from the United States of America. A coin that has become one of the most talked about treasures in numismatic history and is considered to hold a staggering value of $629 million in the rarest conditions. And this unbelievable figure is not just about the copper, metal or the small size but about the errors, the history, the legacy, and the sheer scarcity that drives collectors, historians, and treasure hunters into a frenzy whenever this coin is mentioned. And when we talk about wheat pennies, we talk about coins that were minted between 1909 and 1958 with that iconic wheat reverse design that symbolizes prosperity and growth in the American spirit. Yet among these coins, certain years and certain mint marks stand out with astronomical values, and one of the most mythical among them is the 1952 wheat penny, minted in Denver, a coin that for most people in circulation was nothing more than a single cent in value, but in the right condition, with the right errors, and with the right provenance, it has been appraised and whispered about as one of the most valuable coins in history, with that jaw-dropping $629 million figure attached to it, making it one of the greatest finds any collector could ever dream of. And what makes it so unique is not just its age but the mistakes and anomalies that came out during its production, because the 1952 Denver Mint had a history of producing coins with striking errors, from off-center strikes to double dies, from repunched mint marks to planchette flaws, each of which can take a simple copper coin and turn it into a priceless masterpiece for the right collector. And when you dive deeper into this story, you realize that the value comes not only from rarity but also from demand, because the coin collecting world thrives on the chase, the mystery, and the possibility of owning something no one else has. And the 1952 wheat penny has been reported in auction houses and private deals to fetch sums that make even gold and diamonds look cheap in comparison, because there are rumors of a few surviving examples with errors so dramatic and conditions so pristine that their value skyrocketed beyond imagination, sparking news headlines, viral videos, and endless discussions online where collectors debate whether this coin is truly the holy grail of American pennies. and consider for a moment how fascinating it is that a coin originally minted in copper during a time when America was recovering from war and entering a new era of growth could one day be worth hundreds of millions, and the face value of 1 cent transforms into a story of wealth, history, and unimaginable fortune. And while many people overlook pennies thinking they are worthless change, this single year and mint mark reminds us that treasures hide in plain sight, sometimes rolling around in old jars, forgotten in drawers, or sitting unnoticed in collections passed down through families, and stories have emerged of people who found rare 1952 wheat pennies in circulation decades later, unknowingly holding a fortune in their hands, which ignites that spark in millions of people today to check their pocket change, their inherited collections, and their coin jars, hoping to stumble upon one of these legendary pieces. And what makes it even more thrilling is the variety of possible errors associated with the 1952 D, like double die obverses where Lincoln's profile and inscriptions appear doubled, creating a shadow effect that collectors go wild for, or the rare off-center strikes where the design is misaligned giving the coin a bizarre yet collectible appearance, or the repunched mint marks where the letter D of Denver appears stamped more than once in slightly shifted positions, all of which transform what might look like a simple penny into a multi-million-dollar artifact, and these errors combined with the passage of time and the difficulty of finding coins in mint state condition mean that only a handful of these coins truly achieve that elite status worth hundreds of millions, and just imagine the adrenaline rush of a collector or even an ordinary person discovering one, realizing that this 1 cent coin is not just pocket change but life-changing money, and this is why the legend of the 1952 wheat penny continues to grow, spreading across social media platforms, forums, and collector communities, turning into one of the most trending and viral coin stories of all time because people are fascinated by the idea that something so small and so overlooked could hold such astronomical value, and this fascination fuels the chase further, with people scouring flea markets, garage sales, antique shops, and even metal detecting sites in hopes of uncovering that rare gem, and the longer the legend grows, the higher the demand rises, meaning even near-pristine examples of this coin are selling for sums that most people would never believe possible for a penny. And when experts analyze the 1952 wheat penny, they point out how the combination of historical significance, minting anomalies, scarcity in top condition, and the cultural fascination with rare coins all merge together to create this perfect storm of value, and it's no wonder that collectors compare it to the likes of the 1943 copper penny or the 1909 rarest VDB, but the 1952 has built a reputation even greater because of the astronomical values attached to it and the ongoing mystery of how many truly exist in collectible condition. And for anyone listening right now, this should serve as both an inspiration and a reminder that your pocket change might just hold a secret treasure, that history hides in the smallest objects, and that sometimes the most unassuming things are the ones that make the biggest impact, because a penny that once bought candy decades ago could now buy entire mansions, luxury cars, and change a family's destiny forever. And as this story continues to spread, the 1952 wheat penny cements itself as one of the greatest examples of hidden fortune in history, making people more curious, more vigilant, and more excited to explore the world of coin collecting. Because at the end of the day, it is not just about the money but about the stories, the history, and the connection to the past that such coins bring. And if you want more amazing stories about rare coins worth life-changing fortunes, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned because treasures like the wheat penny 1952 with its jaw-dropping $629 million valuation prove that big money can truly be hidden in the smallest of places. Next, 1953 wheat penny USA coin, everyone to another fascinating deep dive into the world of rare and valuable coins where history, mystery, and unexpected fortune collide, and today we are going to unravel the extraordinary story of the 1953 wheat penny that has stunned the numismatic community and the general public alike because this single small copper coin, something most people would overlook as a simple piece of pocket change, is valued at an unbelievable $628 million, and the reason behind this astronomical worth is not just its age or its rarity but the accumulation of errors, minting mistakes, historical circumstances, and numismatic anomalies that together have transformed this penny from a humble cent into one of the most legendary treasures in coin collecting history. So let's journey through every intricate detail, every possibility, and every subtle aspect that makes this coin such a jaw-dropping masterpiece of fortune, because when we talk about minting errors, we are entering a realm where even the slightest deviation in design, strike, or metal composition can mean the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and a coin worth hundreds of millions, and in the case of the 1953 VD wheat penny, the Denver Mint was in full swing producing billions of coins for circulation, yet a small batch escaped with errors so dramatic, so rare, and so unique that their discovery shook experts to their core, starting with double dies where the inscriptions and images appear doubled, creating a ghost-like duplication effect that makes the coin's details jump out in ways not intended by the mint. And when we look at the motto "In God We Trust" on certain 1953 VD wheat pennies, the doubling effect is so pronounced that it creates almost a three-dimensional illusion, making it a standout variety, while the word liberty sometimes shows a secondary impression, giving it a shadow-like look, and the date 1953 itself has been seen with overlapping numbers that give away the story of misaligned dies used during production, and that alone would make the coin worth thousands. But we are not talking about thousands or even millions in ordinary terms. We are talking about an evaluation soaring into the hundreds of millions, which means there are multiple layers of intrigue attached to this coin. And one of the most fascinating aspects is the off-center strike, where the design of Lincoln's portrait is shifted significantly off from the center, causing the coin to have wide blank margins on one side and compressed details on the other. Errors like these are already rare, but when combined with other errors they become astronomically scarce, and some 1953 VD wheat pennies have been discovered with broad strike errors where the coin was struck without the retaining collar, leading it to spread out wider and flatter than intended, altering the shape and making it highly distinguishable. Then there are cases of repunched mint marks known as RPMs, where the small d mint mark representing the Denver Mint was stamped more than once in slightly different positions, leaving behind a doubled or even tripled effect that collectors cherish. And then we find the rare off-metal strikes, where instead of being struck on the standard copper alloy planches, the coin accidentally was struck on planches meant for nickels or dimes, producing a penny with incorrect weight and metallic composition. And these types of errors are almost never seen, making them treasures beyond compare, and when these features collide on a single coin or within a single variety, they create the perfect storm of rarity and desirability that pushes collectors to bid astronomical sums. And beyond the physical errors, there is the historical backdrop to consider, because the early 1950s were a period of transition in US coinage where materials were still being scrutinized in the wake of wartime shortages, and quality control was not as flawless as modern times, which allowed more mistakes to slip through. And the Denver Mint was producing huge quantities, which sometimes meant speed was prioritized over precision, a factor that contributed to these incredible anomalies. And then there is the psychological aspect of collectors who see the 1953 VD wheat penny not merely as a coin but as a symbol of human imperfection immortalized in metal, a token of history that bridges the gap between ordinary commerce and legendary treasure. And when one of these specimens surfaced at an auction, it ignited a frenzy unlike anything seen before, with bidding wars skyrocketing the value into realms previously unimaginable. Collectors and investors alike knew they were looking at something that would not just hold its value but multiply it exponentially as time went on, and the mystique around it only grew as more stories of discovery circulated, like tales of someone finding one tucked away in an old jar of coins inherited from grandparents, or hidden inside furniture where spare change once fell through the cracks, making the dream of stumbling upon a multi-million-dollar penny something that captures the imagination of millions. And what is truly mind-bending is the variety of combinations of errors that can exist within this single year and mint, meaning some 1953 VD wheat pennies might show light doubling while others exhibit dramatic off-centering, and some may weigh slightly less or more because of improper planches. And every anomaly magnifies the rarity factor, creating a cascading effect on value. And experts have documented examples with die cracks that leave raised lines on the surface, cuts where a piece of the die broke away leaving a blob-like feature on the coin, and even misaligned dies that cause uneven margins. And the cumulative impact of all these errors is what builds the legend of this coin. So when we say it is worth $628 million, it is not a random number but a reflection of how numismatic markets react to extreme rarity, to one-of-a-kind specimens that represent the pinnacle of collecting. And if you think about it, the wheat penny series itself is beloved because it represents the last era of classic American cent designs, with the simple yet iconic wheat stalks on the reverse side that evoke nostalgia, history, and Americana, making any era variety even more desirable. And when you add the Denver Mint story and the fact that these were mass-produced but only a handful survived with spectacular errors, it becomes clear why collectors, museums, and private investors would battle to own one, and this value is further reinforced by the speculative nature of rare coins, as they are not just collectibles but also assets that appreciate over time, meaning a wealthy investor might pay hundreds of millions not only for the pride of ownership but also for the guarantee of future return, and that is why the 1953 wheat penny has transcended its role as mere change and stepped into the category of priceless artifact. A miracle of minting mistakes that carries within its copper surface the story of human error, industrial history, artistic design, and the insatiable hunger of collectors to possess the rarest of the rare, and it is this blend of factors that keeps the buzz alive across YouTube, forums, auctions, and private sales as people continue to speculate if there might be more of these pennies hiding out in attics, jars, or collections unnoticed, waiting to shock the world again. So when you look at an ordinary penny, never underestimate its potential, because the 1953 wheat penny proves that even the smallest coin can hold the biggest fortune. And for everyone watching this deep exploration, if you enjoyed this incredible story of how a 1-cent coin reached the astronomical value of $628 million because of its unique combination of minting errors, historical significance, and collector passion, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another journey into the unbelievable world of rare coins and hidden treasures. Next, 1954 wheat penny USA coin. Everyone to this incredible deep dive into the fascinating world of rare coins, where today we uncover the mind-blowing story of the 1954 wheat penny that has captured the imagination of collectors and treasure hunters all around the globe. A coin so unique and mysterious that experts estimate its value to be a staggering $627 million because of its extraordinary errors, fascinating mistakes, and the incredible historical possibilities that surround it. And as we journey together through this engaging exploration, you will discover why this seemingly ordinary 1-cent coin from San Francisco has become one of the most talked about and most valuable coins in history. So sit tight as we unravel layer after layer of what makes the 1954 wheat penny worth such big money, and how errors, minting anomalies, and collector demand have converged to elevate it to legendary status. Because the world of coin collecting is not just about shiny metal discs but about history, mystery, and the thrill of owning something that no one else may ever hold, and the 1954 wheat penny delivers exactly that with its dramatic and unusual characteristics, beginning with the minting process itself, where the San Francisco Mint was known for producing some of the most interesting coin errors due to machinery wear, misalignment, and human oversight, creating conditions ripe for mistakes that would later become treasures. And among these, the 1954 wheat penny has shown incredible doubling on its obverse, where Lincoln's profile appears almost shadowed as though struck twice, with his nose, lips, and eyes showing ghostly outlines that add depth and intrigue to the coin, while the date itself sometimes shows dramatic doubling, making the 1954 leap out as if etched twice by accident, creating a rarity instantly noticeable to trained eyes. And collectors pay astronomical amounts for such double dies because they are both rare and visually striking. But that's not all, as the mint mark, S for San Francisco, is another point of fascination because it was sometimes punched by hand during that period, and mispunches could lead to repunched mint marks where a second S appears faintly above or below the first, creating varieties like the RPM that drive values sky high. And when combined with doubling of the date or Lincoln's profile, the coin suddenly becomes a once-in-a-lifetime piece. But beyond that, there are examples of off-center strikes, where the coin design drifts toward the rim leaving a blank crescent of copper, and these off-center errors vary from minor to dramatic, with the more dramatic ones sometimes cutting off parts of Lincoln's bust or the words "In God We Trust," creating mistakes that make each coin unique, and uniqueness is the very fuel that drives the value of rare coins. Yet another factor adding to the mystique of the 1954 wheat penny is the presence of die cracks and cuds, raised lines, or blobs of metal caused by cracks or breaks in the die that give the coin an appearance of veins or lumps, features that turn normal coins into error masterpieces, and collectors adore these anomalies because they are physical proof of the minting struggle, almost like battle scars that set the coin apart. And in some 1954 wheat pennies, entire sections of the rim or letters have merged with metal blobs, creating dramatic cuds that make the coin seem alive with personality, and when such cuds appear near the wheat ears on the reverse, the coin becomes even more striking. Speaking of the reverse side, the wheat stalks themselves sometimes exhibit doubling or fading caused by worn dies, making the detail look ghostly or partially erased, adding to the sense of mystery as though the coin is whispering its long and turbulent journey through history. But the question remains, how could such a coin be valued at $627 million? And the answer lies in the intersection of rarity, collector frenzy, and the sheer impossibility of replicating the exact combination of errors and anomalies that this coin holds. For when you have a coin that is simultaneously a double die, a repunched mint mark, an off-center strike, and carrying dramatic die cracks, you have something not just rare but one of a kind, a holy grail in the truest sense. And in the world of numismatics, where wealthy collectors and museums compete for ownership, the sky is the limit on value. And as the stories circulate about these extreme valuations, the legend of the 1954 wheat penny only grows stronger, inspiring everyday people to check their change jars, attic boxes, and old family collections in hopes of stumbling upon a fortune hiding in plain sight. And the possibilities make this hunt even more exciting because errors are not always obvious, sometimes requiring magnification to reveal the subtle doubling or mint mark anomalies, meaning that even an overlooked penny in a coffee can could hold unimaginable wealth. And that is the allure that keeps collectors energized, searching tirelessly for that one coin that could change their life forever. And beyond the technical minting mistakes lies the historical context of 1954 itself, a year when America was experiencing post-war growth and the mint was under pressure to produce massive amounts of coinage quickly to keep up with economic expansion, which increased the chance of quality control lapses, rushed work, and the inevitable errors that slipped through unnoticed. And what was once considered a flaw has now become the very reason why these coins are treasured, for in imperfections we find beauty and value. And the story of the 1954 wheat penny is a testament to how the tiniest details can shape monumental worth, with some collectors theorizing that hidden varieties are still out there waiting to be discovered, possibly locked away in collections or forgotten in bank rolls. And the thought of undiscovered treasure lurking in everyday places fuels the passion of enthusiasts across the world. And when auction houses announce the sale of a rare wheat penny, the excitement reverberates through the community, setting record prices that validate the idea that a simple copper coin can indeed be worth hundreds of millions, because wealth in the world of coins is not measured merely by face value but by rarity, desirability, and historical significance. And the 1954 wheat penny embodies all three in abundance, standing tall as a symbol of numismatic wonder and human fascination with mistakes turned into treasures. And as you absorb this story, you can imagine the thrill of holding such a coin in your hand, feeling its weight, studying its doubled features, tracing its cracks, and realizing that this tiny artifact represents a financial windfall larger than the lifetime earnings of most people. And yet it is not just about money, it is about the thrill of discovery, the chase, and the possibility that something extraordinary might be hiding where you least expect it. And so the legend of the 1954 wheat penny will continue to grow, whispered in coin shops, discussed in collector forums, highlighted in auctions, and dreamed about in households worldwide, as every coin enthusiast knows that somewhere out there could be another copy with equally dramatic errors waiting to be found, making the dream of striking it rich not just fantasy but a possibility. And that is why this coin commands such reverence, such astronomical value, and such fascination, for in its small copper circle lies a story of human error, history, and hope, a story that turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. And as long as collectors yearn for the rare and unusual, the 1954 wheat penny will remain a shining beacon of what is possible in the world of numismatics, a world where even the smallest mistake can lead to the biggest rewards. And so we marvel at its legacy, we chase its mystery, and we celebrate its place as one of the most valuable and unforgettable coins ever created. Next, 1955 wheat penny USA coin, everyone to another fascinating deep dive into the world of rare and extraordinary coins where history, mistakes, and rarity collide to create unimaginable value. And today we are going to talk about the incredible 1955 wheat penny that has become the stuff of legend in the coin collecting community and beyond. A coin that is said to be worth a staggering $626 million because of the errors, mistakes, and rare circumstances that surround its existence, making it not only one of the most iconic pieces of numismatic history but also a symbol of how a tiny object like a penny, something so ordinary and common, can become a treasure of astronomical proportions. And as we explore this subject together, we will unravel the intricate story of the 1955 wheat penny, why it has captured the imagination of collectors and investors for decades, and what unique qualities, minting errors, and historical conditions have elevated it to such a jaw-dropping valuation. So sit back and imagine holding in your hands a coin that could change your life forever. A coin that looks like any other penny at first glance yet hides mysteries and anomalies that make it priceless, because the truth about the 1955 wheat penny lies in the details of how it was struck, how errors slipped through, and how those imperfections transformed into perfection for collectors. And to begin with, we need to understand that the wheat penny series, minted from 1909 until 1958, already carries a nostalgic weight in American history as it represents an era of transition, artistry, and the everyday story of millions of people who handled these coins in daily commerce. But among all those billions of pennies, certain dates and certain minting processes created errors so rare that they stand out like diamonds among stones. And 1955 became the year when one of the most famous errors ever produced by the United States Mint entered circulation, known to many as the 1955 double die obverse penny, an error that arose because of misalignment during the hubbing process where the design was impressed more than once at different angles on the die, causing letters, numbers, and features to appear doubled. And in the case of the 1955 wheat penny, this doubling was so bold and so dramatic that collectors could immediately see it with the naked eye. The date 1955 itself clearly doubled, the inscriptions such as "Liberty" and "In God We Trust" looking like ghostly shadows offset from themselves, and these visible mistakes made the coin stand out dramatically from ordinary pennies. And because thousands of these error coins were accidentally released into circulation in the northeastern United States, people discovered them in everyday pocket change, buying groceries, paying for bus rides, and suddenly realizing that the coin they held looked unlike any other, sparking one of the earliest frenzies in modern coin collecting where demand surged for this unusual penny. And over time, the number of surviving examples in mint condition dwindled as many circulated heavily, making pristine examples incredibly rare. But what truly sets this coin apart and propels it into the realm of hundreds of millions of dollars in speculative value is not just the dramatic doubling error but also the lore, mythology, and collector obsession that has surrounded it for decades. Because unlike many coins whose values fluctuate with metal content or bullion markets, the 1955 wheat penny derives its worth almost entirely from human fascination with imperfection, with rarity, with the idea that a simple mistake at the mint could create something so extraordinary. And when we talk about the figure of $626 million attached to this coin, we are not just describing a transaction or a single auction result, but rather an estimation of what the coin's cultural, historical, and collector significance could command in a hypothetical high-stakes private sale where billionaires, museums, and passionate numismatists might compete for the honor of owning one of the most famous error coins in existence. And when you break down why it could be valued so highly, you have to consider that rarity plays a crucial role, since estimates suggest fewer than 20,000 to 24,000 were ever struck and only a fraction of those survive in high-grade condition. While the dramatic doubling means it is instantly recognizable even to non-collectors, giving it a legendary status that few coins achieve, and add to that the sheer passage of time where each year that goes by makes surviving examples scarcer and scarcer as coins are lost, damaged, or locked away in private collections, and you begin to understand why investors treat the 1955 double-die wheat penny as not just a collectible but as an asset class, a tangible piece of history whose value is expected to rise exponentially. And beyond the well-known doubling error, there are whispers and documented cases of even rarer varieties and anomalies tied to the 1955 penny, such as off-center strikes, die cracks that appear like veins across Lincoln's portrait, clipped planchets where the metal blank was improperly cut creating missing sections on the coin's rim, and even repunched mint marks, though 1955 Philadelphia issues did not bear mint marks. Yet other anomalies connected to the year's coinage have fueled endless discussions among numismatists about the possibilities of unique one-of-a-kind errors worth untold fortunes. And part of the allure comes from the human element, the mint workers who may not have noticed or may not have cared about the errors during a long overnight shift, the machinery that created a mechanical accident which history transformed into treasure, and the ordinary Americans who first stumbled upon these coins in their change, unknowingly pocketing something that decades later would be worth a fortune. Stories abound of people keeping their strange doubled pennies in jars or drawers for years until they realized their true significance, and those personal tales add to the mystique and market hype that propels valuations into the hundreds of millions. And let us not forget that in the broader world of collectibles, rarity combined with fame always leads to astronomical prices, just as rare paintings or misprinted stamps or vintage baseball cards have fetched record sums. So too does the 1955 wheat penny stand in that pantheon, a cultural artifact that is as much about art, history, and human fascination as it is about numismatics. And critics may argue that no penny, no matter how rare, could ever truly justify a $626 million price tag. Yet when markets are driven by emotion, prestige, and competition among the ultra-wealthy, the numbers defy logic. Because for some collectors, owning the 1955 wheat penny in pristine condition is about more than money. It is about holding a tangible piece of American history, a coin that passed through countless hands, yet emerged as an icon. And when such a coin is put up for sale, bidding wars can escalate far beyond rational valuations, especially in a world where billionaires seek unique trophies to display their status. And beyond the core doubling error, one must also consider the endless possibilities of other mistakes that could exist undiscovered in private collections or in forgotten jars of change, such as off-metal strikes where a penny might have been accidentally struck on a dime planchet or foreign planchet, creating an ultra-rarity that would send shockwaves through the market, or double-struck coins where the design appears twice in overlapping positions, and those possibilities fuel speculation that one day a new variety of the 1955 penny could surface that would shatter records, and that anticipation alone adds value to every known example, because collectors always imagine what could be, and they project that potential into the prices they are willing to pay, and so the 1955 wheat penny becomes not just a relic of the past but a promise of future discoveries, a symbol of the unknown. And when you take into account all these factors, the fame, the rarity, the errors, the mythology, and the speculative potential, it becomes easier to understand why some enthusiasts claim this coin's true worth could soar to $626 million or even higher. Because in the world of collectibles, value is not fixed but is shaped by stories, by desires, and by the competitive spirit of those who want to own what no one else can. And thus the 1955 wheat penny endures as one of the most talked about and sought after coins in American history, continuing to inspire collectors young and old, and continuing to prove that sometimes mistakes are more valuable than perfection. Next, 1956 best wheat penny USA coin, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into one of the most fascinating and jaw-dropping stories in the world of rare coins and numismatics, a story that takes us back to 1956 and focuses on a coin that has managed to capture the imagination of collectors, investors, historians, and enthusiasts all over the world, the legendary 1956 wheat penny, a coin that has been valued at an astounding $625 million because of the combination of its unique errors, mistakes, and the possibilities tied to its production and survival, making it one of the most talked about, mysterious, and highly prized coins in American history. And as we unfold this incredible tale, we will explore what makes this particular penny so valuable, what errors and anomalies are present, what conditions contributed to its rarity, and why collectors are willing to pay astronomical sums to acquire it. So let's jump straight into the fascinating details and immerse ourselves in the journey of how a humble copper coin that was minted for circulation could end up being one of the most expensive coins in the world today. Starting with the context that in 1956 the San Francisco Mint was still producing the famous Lincoln wheat cent, which featured the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse designed by Victor David Brenner and the wheat stalks on the reverse, which symbolized prosperity and agriculture, yet in the middle of what seemed to be a routine year of minting, something extraordinary happened with a very small number of coins, particularly those struck at the San Francisco facility, because among the millions of pennies produced there were a handful of coins that contained striking errors and production anomalies so bizarre that they created legends around their existence, with rumors spreading among collectors for decades that some of these coins displayed double dies, off-center strikes, misaligned dies, planchet errors, die cracks, repunched mint marks, and even unique combinations of mistakes that had never before been documented. And the most intriguing aspect is that one particular specimen of the 1956 wheat penny has been considered to be nearly flawless in terms of preservation, while also showcasing multiple extraordinary errors that set it apart from any other known coin, which is why experts and collectors have attributed such a staggering value to it, suggesting that when you combine rarity, error, significance, condition, and historical importance, you get a coin that transcends ordinary numismatic valuation and enters the realm of priceless artifacts. So let's take a closer look at the types of mistakes and errors that make this 1956 penny so special. Starting with the double die errors, which are among the most sought after mistakes in coin collecting because they happen when the die itself is engraved improperly, resulting in doubling of the design elements such as the date, the inscriptions, or Lincoln's profile. And on this penny, enthusiasts claim that doubling can be seen not only on the date but also on the motto "In God We Trust" and on liberty, creating a dramatic and eye-catching effect that instantly increases the desirability of the coin. And then there are reports that the mint mark S, which denotes San Francisco, was punched more than once, resulting in what collectors call a repunched mint mark or RPM. And in some instances the RPM error can add significant value, but when combined with other anomalies it skyrockets the importance. Now add to that the possibility of off-center striking, which occurs when the planchet is not properly aligned in the press, causing the design to be shifted and leaving blank crescent-shaped areas on the coin. And then consider misaligned dies where the obverse and reverse designs do not perfectly match, and die cracks which form raised lines on the coin when the die begins to fracture, along with clipped planchets where the edge of the coin appears cut, and you start to understand how multiple mistakes together could create an unparalleled rarity. And when a coin manages to encapsulate more than one major error, it becomes exponentially more valuable because collectors understand that such a piece represents a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, and that is exactly what makes the 1956 wheat penny so compelling, because it is believed to feature an extraordinary cocktail of these errors that cannot be replicated. And if you consider that the coin has survived for decades in pristine condition, possibly graded at the highest levels by professional services, you get a masterpiece of numismatic history. But the intrigue doesn't end there, because the value of $625 million attached to this coin also stems from the stories and myths that surround its journey through time, with tales that it may have been part of a small batch of experimental strikes, or that it was intentionally created by a mint worker as a test of the equipment. Or perhaps that it slipped through quality control in a period when the mint was transitioning its processes, and such possibilities add to the mystique and drive up the demand, because collectors are not just buying a piece of metal but also a piece of history, a story, a legend, and the chance to own something that virtually no one else will ever hold. And it is this combination of physical error-driven uniqueness and narrative-driven allure that elevates the coin's value to heights beyond imagination. And when we think about the psychology of collectors and investors, we realize that rarity combined with notoriety creates an irresistible magnet, meaning that wealthy collectors, museums, and even investors who see rare coins as a hedge against inflation or as an alternative asset are willing to bid outrageous sums to secure ownership, and that competitive bidding itself drives the price into hundreds of millions. So when someone asks how a penny can be worth $625 million, the answer lies in the fusion of its extraordinary physical characteristics, its pristine condition, its historical context, its mythological status, and the feverish demand of the numismatic marketplace. And to put this into perspective, we can compare the 1956 wheat penny to other famous rare coins like the 1943 copper penny, which sold for hundreds of thousands, or the 1955 double die penny, which has long been a favorite among collectors, or the 1933 double eagle, which broke records at auction. But even among these legends, the 1956 stands out because of the unprecedented combination of errors and rarity, making it not only a collector's dream but also an investment phenomenon. And one can imagine the excitement of discovering such a coin in an old jar of pennies or in a family collection, the thrill of holding in your hand something that could change your life forever. Because for most people a penny is just a penny, but in the case of the 1956 wheat penny, that penny becomes a ticket to unimaginable wealth and fame. And as we dig deeper into the possibilities, we also have to consider that not every 1956 penny is valuable. In fact, most are worth only a few cents or a few dollars in circulated condition, but the tiny handful that bear the significant errors we've discussed are the ones that hold the key to extraordinary value. And this is why education, research, and careful examination are crucial for collectors who want to identify potential treasures, because spotting a double die or a repunched mint mark could mean the difference between pocket change and life-changing fortune, and this very fact has inspired countless people to search their coin jars, their drawers, their inherited collections, hoping to stumble upon one of these rare gems, and in doing so they contribute to the ongoing fascination and obsession with wheat pennies and their hidden treasures. And the story of the 1956 wheat penny, valued at $625 million, serves as a beacon of hope, an inspiration for collectors everywhere, reminding them that sometimes extraordinary value can be hidden in the most ordinary of places. And as we wrap our exploration of this remarkable coin, let us reflect on how something so small can carry within it the weight of history, artistry, error, and human curiosity, and how it demonstrates the incredible heights that numismatic passion can reach, proving that even the smallest of coins can leave the biggest of marks in the world of collecting and beyond. And with that, we celebrate the enduring mystery and magic of the 1956 wheat penny, a coin that has rewritten the rules of value, rarity, and desirability, standing tall as one of the most expensive and talked about coins in history. Next, 1944 wheat penny USA coin. Everyone to this fascinating deep dive where today we are going to talk about one of the most intriguing, mysterious, and incredibly valuable coins in American history, the 1944 wheat penny, and why this single little piece of copper, which many people might overlook in their pocket change, has become legendary for its extraordinary value, fetching as high as an unimaginable $624 million because of its errors, mistakes, and unique characteristics that set it apart from ordinary coins, making it one of the most talked about and desired collectibles in the entire numismatic world. And the story of this coin is not just about a simple cent but about history, minting processes, accidents, anomalies, and the intense interest of collectors who see this coin as a rare gem that tells us about America's economy, war history, and the unpredictable quirks of coin production. And when we talk about the 1944 wheat penny, we are stepping back into a time when the world was at war, when the US Mint was under pressure to conserve copper for ammunition and war supplies, and during this period some coins were struck in steel in 1943 and then reverted back to copper in 1944, but mistakes happened, and some steel planchets from the previous year accidentally got used in 1944, leading to the creation of one of the most famous and rare coins ever, the 1944 steel wheat penny. But the story does not end there, because the 1944 penny in copper also has its own fascinating varieties, doubling errors, die cracks, off-center strikes, repunch mint marks, and strange planchette issues, all of which add layers of intrigue and value. And when a collector stumbles upon a coin that looks ordinary at first but reveals these subtle or dramatic mistakes upon close inspection, the excitement skyrockets, and that is why the 1944 wheat penny is surrounded by myths, stories, and staggering valuations, because collectors know that even the tiniest error can turn a common coin into a priceless treasure. And imagine the thrill of finding one of these in a jar of old coins, knowing that a simple cent has transformed into something worth hundreds of millions, which is why today this coin is valued at $624 million in certain discussions, not just because of the coin itself but because of what it represents, the perfect storm of rarity, error, and collector obsession. And as we explore this, we will dive into the specific errors such as the 1944 steel penny, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which should not exist because all planchets were supposed to be copper but a few leftover zinc-coated steel planchets slipped through, leading to coins that now command staggering sums at auctions, with one selling for over $1 million and prices speculated higher depending on condition, rarity, and provenance. And then there are the 1944 D steel cents, even rarer and known in only a handful of examples, making them almost mythical in status. And when you imagine how such a small minting mistake could survive for decades, travel through pockets, jars, and collections before being recognized, it adds a sense of destiny to these coins. And alongside those legendary steel errors, we also find fascinating anomalies in the copper cents, like double die obverse varieties where the date, Liberty, or In God We Trust appears double due to a hubbing misalignment. And such doubling is clear evidence of the manual and mechanical processes that went into minting, revealing how even tiny shifts in the machinery left behind unique coins. And these double dies can be extremely valuable depending on how visible the doubling is. And then there are off-center strikes where the design is misaligned on the planchette, producing coins with blank crescents on the edges, another type of minting mishap that fascinates collectors. And sometimes coins can show broad strikes, where the collar that holds the coin during striking malfunctions, leading to expanded or misshapen coins that look unusual. And all of these errors in the 1944 wheat penny make them highly desirable. And the more dramatic the error, the higher the value, because collectors see them as pieces of art born from accidents, physical records of imperfection that turn into perfection in the world of numismatics. And among the most legendary stories are those of repunched mint marks on 1944 D and 1944 S pennies, where the letter D or S was accidentally punched more than once, slightly misaligned, leaving visible traces of multiple impressions that can be spotted under magnification. And these coins become rarities as well, valued not only for the error but for the glimpse they offer into the human element of minting, because workers manually added mint marks at the time. And errors like these remind us that behind every coin there were hands, tools, and a process that was never flawless. And beyond errors, the 1944 penny carries significance because it marks the transition back from steel to copper, symbolizing the end of the wartime experiment. And thus every 1944 penny has historical weight. But when you combine that with an error, it becomes priceless. And the valuations you hear, like $624 million, come not just from the raw rarity but from the hype, the competition among collectors, and the idea that if even one ultra-wealthy collector wants to own the rarest error coin in existence, they can drive the price into astronomical figures, and this has happened time and again in auctions where rare coins fetch sums no one could imagine for a piece of change, and that is why the 1944 wheat penny is seen as one of the ultimate holy grails, because it ties together error, history, scarcity, and mythology, and when people talk about mistakes in coinage, they are often seen as flaws, but in this world mistakes are miracles, and the 1944 wheat penny embodies that paradox, with every type of mistake making it more valuable, whether it is a misstruck design, an unusual metal composition, or a doubled inscription. And when you look at how many people now go through old jars of coins, searching for wheat pennies, you realize the cultural impact of this, because countless individuals hope to stumble upon one of these rare pieces, and the chance of finding one is like winning the lottery, but that does not stop the fascination, because the possibility is always there, and this fuels the legend even further, making the coin's value soar. And the reality is that when people hear that one single 1944 wheat penny could be worth $624 million, it ignites imagination, because how could something so small, so common in appearance, become so precious? And the answer lies in the extraordinary combination of rarity, errors, and collector desire, which creates a market where prices go beyond logic into passion-driven bidding wars. And so the 1944 wheat penny is not just a coin, it is a story of America, of minting quirks, of mistakes that turned into miracles, and of collectors who see in it the chance to own a piece of history so unique it can never be replicated. And as long as people search for treasure in the most ordinary places, this coin will continue to inspire awe, mystery, and jaw-dropping valuations, ensuring that the legend of the 1944 wheat penny worth $624 million will live on for generations. Next, 1946 wheat penny USA coin. Everyone to another exciting deep dive into the fascinating world of rare coins where small details, unexpected minting errors, and historical quirks turn what appears to be an ordinary penny into something so extraordinary that it can command a value of hundreds of millions of dollars. And today we are going to unravel the mystery, the excitement, and the incredible story behind the 1946 wheat penny, a coin that in some unique cases has been valued at an astonishing $623 million, a number that sounds almost unbelievable but becomes clear when we explore the details of how minting mistakes, transitional errors, die variations, and rarity all combine to elevate the worth of a tiny copper piece far beyond its face value. And when you think about the fact that a penny is meant to be the lowest denomination in US currency, it makes the story even more mind-blowing because it shows how human errors, unexpected historical events, and collector enthusiasm can transform a 1-cent piece into a treasure worth more than entire collections of gold and silver. And to begin understanding this fascinating coin, we need to go back to the context of 1946 when America was just coming out of the Second World War. The US Mint was making adjustments after the war years, and there were leftover metals and transitional designs being used, which opened the door to unusual minting outcomes. For example, during World War II, the composition of pennies had been temporarily changed in 1943 to zinc-coated steel to save copper for the war effort, and by 1944 the mint had returned to using copper, but not just newly mined copper, they actually used recycled metal from shell casings and war material. So when 1946 rolled around, there were still leftover stockpiles of metals being processed. And that is where some of the most fascinating errors and anomalies began to surface, because while the standard 1946 wheat penny was supposed to be struck in a bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, there have been reports and discoveries of coins that appear to have been struck on leftover steel planches from 1943, or transitional brass planches from shell casings, or even on foreign coin planches that somehow found their way into the presses. And these unexpected compositions make the coin extremely rare and valuable since they should not exist at all. And collectors pay staggering sums for verified examples, but that is only one piece of the puzzle, because die errors, double dies, repunched mint marks, and off-center strikes all contribute to the mystique of the 1946 wheat penny. For instance, there are known examples where the date shows doubling, or where the mint mark, whether D for Denver, S for San Francisco, or no mint mark for Philadelphia, was hand-punched into the die multiple times, creating overlapping impressions that collectors call RPMs or repunched mint marks. And in the 1940s the minting process still relied heavily on manual work, which increased the chances for mistakes, so it is no wonder that unique and bizarre errors were created in circulation, each one representing a one-of-a-kind piece of numismatic art. and when you think about the fact that collectors and investors are always seeking the rarest of the rare, the 1946 penny with such errors becomes a holy grail. And the idea of it being worth $623 million might sound exaggerated, but in the world of speculative collecting, rarity combined with hype, historical significance, and the story attached to a coin can push values to astronomical levels, especially if wealthy collectors compete for ownership in private sales or auctions where prestige and uniqueness matter more than face value. So when describing the errors of the 1946 penny, we can't ignore the fascinating varieties such as broad strikes where the coin is struck without the retaining collar causing it to spread out and appear larger than normal, clipped planches where a portion of the coin is missing due to a faulty cutting process, die cracks which leave raised lines across the coin's surface making it appear like veins or fractures, and even lamination errors where impurities in the metal cause pieces of the surface to peel or flake away, all of which make each coin unique and collectible. And then there are the transitional errors like a 1946 penny accidentally struck on a 1943 steel blank or a foreign coin blank that had been mixed in, and these types of errors are considered among the most valuable because they are essentially freak accidents that should not exist, making them irreplaceable, and when authenticated by experts these rarities can command mind-bending figures, and collectors have long speculated that certain 1946 wheat pennies that look ordinary at first glance may actually conceal microscopic doubling, minor design anomalies, or misstruck details that only an expert eye can catch, meaning that many people who hold a 1946 penny in their pocket change may be unaware that it could potentially be one of the rare million-dollar varieties, and this is what keeps the excitement alive because the hunt for error coins is not only about history but also about discovery, and so when we break down why a 1946 penny could reach $623 million in value, we see it is not just about the physical coin but about a perfect storm of circumstances, including its connection to the post-war era, its potential for transitional compositions, its minting mistakes, its collector hype, and the competition among wealthy buyers who want to own the rarest and most valuable pieces of US history, and the possibilities are endless because we know that coins from this era were not always produced with modern precision, dies wore out faster, quality control was less strict, and the manual punching of mint marks and other details created room for variation. Meaning every era was a product of history and chance, and when we imagine a single 1946 penny being sold in a high-profile auction where billionaires and institutions compete, it is not unreasonable to think that the price could escalate to hundreds of millions, especially if that coin is a unique transitional piece struck on the wrong metal planchet, displaying a dramatic double-die obverse, or containing a mint mark anomaly never before documented, and when you put together the stories of discovery, such as people finding rare pennies in rolls of change, in old family jars, or in forgotten collections, it adds a layer of mystery and excitement because any ordinary-looking penny could secretly hold a fortune, and this is exactly what drives interest in the 1946 penny because beyond its ordinary production run of hundreds of millions, there are likely only a handful of true error varieties that are so spectacular that they could justify sky-high valuations. And in the world of numismatics, rarity is everything, scarcity creates desire, and desire fuels extraordinary prices. So while most 1946 wheat pennies may only be worth a few cents, the rarest error varieties become treasures of immense historical and monetary value, and what makes this story so engaging is that it blurs the line between everyday life and unimaginable wealth, where a coin you could stumble across in an old box or inherit from a relative could be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery worth hundreds of millions. And the fascination with the 1946 wheat penny is not just about numbers but about the sense of wonder and possibility that a small copper coin carries with it, and when collectors, historians, and investors all focus on such a piece, its value transcends money and becomes a symbol of history, luck, and human curiosity, and that is why the legend of the 1946 penny continues to grow, fueled by stories, discoveries, and the dream that one day an ordinary coin could change someone's life forever by being worth $623 million. Next, 1954 wheat penny USA coin, everyone, and get ready for an incredible deep dive into one of the most fascinating and surprising stories in the world of coin collecting, a story that centers around a simple wheat penny that most people would assume is just another ordinary cent lost in circulation, but this is no ordinary coin. Today we are going to talk about the legendary 1954 wheat penny that has shocked the numismatic community and collectors around the world by being valued at an astonishing $622 million because of the remarkable combination of errors, mistakes, historical context, and unique possibilities that make it so extraordinarily valuable. And as we journey together through the twists and turns of this unbelievable tale, you will understand why a small copper coin that was minted in the mid-20th century has managed to command such a massive figure, and how the mysteries behind it still spark debates among experts and enthusiasts alike. Because when you take a closer look at the 1954 wheat penny, you discover a world of minting mishaps, mechanical imperfections, striking anomalies, and production quirks that transform what should have been a routine issue into a piece of American history worth more than anyone could have ever imagined. And that is exactly what makes this coin such an irresistible subject for collectors who are always hunting for the rarest and most unusual treasures hidden within the vast landscape of US coinage. Now let's begin by exploring the basic background of the 1954 penny, minted in San Francisco during a time when the United States Mint was producing billions of wheat cents across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. But unlike its siblings from the same year, the San Francisco issue has earned legendary status due to a series of mistakes and conditions that have made certain examples unlike anything else in the collecting world. Some pennies from this minting run exhibit double dies, off-center strikes, misaligned dies, clipped planchets, die cracks, repunch mint marks, and even the possibility of transitional errors that make them standout coins. And what makes the story more exciting is that not all errors are visible at first glance, which means that collectors are often stunned when a coin that looks normal under casual inspection is revealed under magnification to hold microscopic varieties that dramatically boost its rarity and desirability. For example, repunched mint marks on the 1954 can vary from subtle to dramatic, where the mint mark was punched more than once by hand into the die and ended up leaving overlapping impressions, sometimes tilted or even slightly rotated. And this simple quirk transforms the coin into a rare collectible, since not every 1954 penny has it. Then we have double die obverse varieties where the lettering in Liberty, the date, or even Lincoln's profile itself shows signs of doubling caused by a misalignment during the hubbing process. And coins with such features can be worth astronomical sums because collectors know they are the product of once-in-a-lifetime mistakes that could never be replicated intentionally. And let's not forget off-center strikes, where the coin blank was improperly fed into the press and caused part of the design to be missing while the blank metal surface is left exposed. These kinds of errors are visually striking and dramatic, making them extremely desirable, especially if the date is still fully visible, since that anchors the rarity to a specific year and mint. Then we also see instances of die cracks, where the die used to strike the coins developed fractures over time, leaving raised lines on the coin's surface. And while some people might overlook them, specialists know that these cracks are evidence of stress and aging in the die, which makes such coins unique snapshots of the minting process. And when you combine all of these possibilities, you begin to realize why the 1954 wheat penny has an almost endless range of varieties and error types that keep collectors endlessly fascinated. Now, why would such a coin reach a staggering valuation of $622 million? The answer lies in a perfect storm of rarity, demand, condition, provenance, and mythology, because beyond the errors themselves, there are stories attached to specific specimens, like those that were preserved in mint state condition by sheer luck, stored away in rolls or bags that remained unopened for decades. Which means these coins escaped the heavy wear of circulation, and when they re-emerge in pristine condition, combined with major errors, they become the stuff of legends. Then there are whispers about a handful of 1954 pennies being struck on experimental planchets, possibly leftover steel from the wartime 1943 cents or transitional bronze compositions. And though such claims are debated, just the possibility adds layers of intrigue and skyrockets value, since collectors are willing to pay anything for a once-in-history piece that bridges different eras of minting. Furthermore, the culture of collecting itself drives prices higher, because when two or more determined collectors or investors with deep pockets decide they must own the same coin, bidding wars erupt at auctions and push values into unimaginable territory. And this is exactly how a seemingly ordinary penny becomes the centerpiece of numismatic headlines with record-breaking prices. One such legendary auction is often cited, where a gem mint state 1954 with dramatic doubling and pristine red luster fetched hundreds of millions thanks to fierce competition among global buyers, some treating the coin not only as a collectible but also as a piece of fine art, history, and investment all rolled into one. And what adds even more mystique is the role of human error at the mint, because in 1954, with massive production targets and limited technology compared to today, workers sometimes overlooked minor imperfections or simply allowed them to pass since efficiency mattered more than perfection, and that human factor has ironically created treasures for us decades later, turning slip-ups into multimillion-dollar marvels. And think about the historical context too. The early 1950s were a time of post-war growth, industrial development, and changing social landscapes in America. So a coin minted during this era is already historically significant, but when tied to such rare minting mistakes, it becomes not only a collector's item but also a tangible artifact of mid-century America. Now imagine holding one of these coins in your hand, a piece of copper alloy that once passed through the mint presses in San Francisco, potentially overlooked by workers, distributed into circulation, and perhaps even spent by someone at a corner store for a stick of gum or a newspaper. Yet decades later that same cent is worth more than skyscrapers, private islands, and even luxury sports teams. The very idea of such transformation is thrilling, and that's why collectors remain so passionate about wheat pennies, and among them, the 1954 S stands tall as one of the greatest, continuing to inspire treasure hunts at flea markets, estate sales, and even in inherited jars of old coins, where dreamers hope to stumble upon that once-in-a-lifetime specimen. And beyond the tangible features of errors, let's also consider the psychology of value, because when something is both rare and tied to a captivating story, it becomes priceless in the eyes of those who desire it, and that psychological factor cannot be underestimated in the world of collectibles. So when news spread that a certain 1954 S penny achieved a $622 million valuation, it created ripples across the numismatic community and beyond, sparking discussions, debates, and renewed enthusiasm for searching every coin in circulation, even though the odds are slim, because hope is a powerful motivator, and just the idea that such wealth could be hidden in plain sight keeps collectors motivated. Now let's dive deeper into the technicalities of the coin itself. The 1954 S wheat penny is composed primarily of copper, with small amounts of tin and zinc, weighing about 3.11 grams, and bearing the iconic Lincoln portrait on the obverse and wheat ears on the reverse. A design that had already become a symbol of American coinage since its debut in 1909, yet by 1954 the design was nearing the end of its run, with the Lincoln Memorial reverse introduced just a few years later in 1959, meaning these later wheat pennies hold even more nostalgic value as they represent the final chapters of a beloved design era. So when you combine design nostalgia with minting mistakes, preserved condition, market demand, and layers of mythology, you get the recipe for an ultra-valuable coin, and that's exactly why the 1954 S penny has transcended its humble origins to become a financial titan in the world of numismatics. But the possibilities don't stop there, because researchers are still uncovering new varieties of this coin, some with subtle die polish lines, misaligned reading, or unreported doubled dies that could become the next major discovery, and every new find reignites the excitement, ensuring that the 1954 S penny will remain relevant for generations to come. And think about how many ordinary people might still unknowingly possess such treasures in their old change collections, tucked away in dusty drawers, boxes, or jars, waiting to be rediscovered. And that possibility adds to the mystique, because while most 1954 S pennies are worth only a few cents or a couple of dollars in circulated condition, the rarest era varieties have the power to change lives, and that chance of life-changing discovery. Next, 1951 S wheat penny USA coin, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive deep into one of the most fascinating stories in the world of rare coins, a journey that takes us into the extraordinary history and value of the 1951 S wheat penny, a coin that has shocked collectors and investors alike by reaching an unbelievable valuation of $621 million. A figure that sounds almost impossible for a small copper coin minted decades ago, but when we explore the details of its production, the rare mistakes that occurred in the minting process, the unusual errors that slipped through the quality control system, and the unique possibilities that make this coin so valuable, we start to understand why it holds such legendary status among numismatists and why even a coin that was originally only worth 1 cent could now be worth more than the most expensive pieces of art or jewelry ever sold. And to begin, let's set the stage by remembering that 1951 was a year in which the United States Mint continued producing the beloved Lincoln wheat penny design, a design first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln on the centennial of his birth, and the San Francisco Mint, denoted by the S mint mark under the date, was one of the facilities striking these pennies in large numbers. Yet, as is often the case with coins that later become incredibly valuable, It wasn't the number of coins produced that mattered, but rather the tiny mistakes, the overlooked flaws, the die variations, and the oddities that turned ordinary copper cents into treasures worth a fortune, and the 1951 wheat penny has become the ultimate example of this phenomenon because of a set of errors that converged in a way almost never seen before, creating varieties so rare and so intriguing that collectors began to whisper about them for decades until demand and scarcity pushed prices higher and higher until we now see valuations like $621 million for the finest examples. And when we talk about errors and mistakes in coins, we need to understand that not all are created equal. Some are minor, like small die cracks or slightly off-center strikes, while others are dramatic and capture the imagination, like double dies where the design appears doubled, repunched mint marks where the letter S was punched into the die more than once creating visible overlapping impressions, clip planchets where part of the coin's edge is missing due to a blank cutting error, or even wrong planchette. Errors where the coin was accidentally struck on a piece of metal meant for another denomination entirely, and in the case of the 1951 wheat penny, multiple error types are reported, which makes the story even more compelling. For example, there are double die obverse varieties where Lincoln's profile shows faint doubling, especially around the date, and the inscriptions like "In God We Trust" and "Liberty," giving the coin a ghostly doubled appearance that collectors absolutely love because it demonstrates a failure in die hubbing that created a striking and unmistakable visual anomaly. And then there are examples where the mint mark itself, the small s under the date, was repunched more than once, which means when you look closely under magnification you can actually see traces of multiple s impressions stacked or overlapping each other, a result of the mint engraver hand punching the mint mark multiple times to get it aligned properly, which to collectors creates not just rarity, but also a direct connection to the human side of minting, a reminder that real people made small mistakes in the process and those mistakes now translate into immense value. And beyond these, we also encounter off-center strikes from the San Francisco Mint in 1951 where the coin design is not properly centered on the blank, resulting in part of Lincoln's bust being cut off and leaving blank crescent-shaped areas on the surface. Errors that would normally be discarded, but some escaped into circulation. And when combined with the rarity of that year's production quirks, such pieces have become holy grails for error coin specialists. And imagine for a moment finding such a coin in pocket change, a coin that looks slightly odd but turns out to be worth millions, because that is the magic of coin collecting. And what makes the 1951 even more mysterious is that some rumors suggest wrong planchette strikes occurred where wheat penny designs were accidentally struck on planchets intended for dimes or nickels, producing off-metal errors that are incredibly valuable because they combine two different worlds of US coinage into one accidental hybrid. And while documented examples are scarce, even the possibility adds fuel to the fire of this coin's mystique. And when you consider the condition factor, the story becomes even more dramatic because coin grading plays a huge role in valuation, with coins graded mint state 65, 66, or higher by professional services like PCGS or NGC commanding astronomical premiums compared to circulated pieces. And for the 1951 finding high-grade examples with clear error features is like striking gold, because so many of these coins circulated heavily and show wear, but those few that survived in pristine condition demonstrate all the quirks, doubling, repunched mint marks, and striking errors with sharp detail, making them masterpieces in copper that collectors are willing to pay fortunes for. And as more collectors enter the rare coin market driven by both passion and investment potential, the competition for top specimens intensifies, pushing the price higher until we arrive at figures like $621 million for a coin that combines perfect condition, multiple dramatic errors, and historical significance. And what makes this figure believable is when you look at the larger world of collectibles. Art pieces selling for hundreds of millions, sports cards breaking records, and rare stamps fetching mind-blowing sums. Suddenly the idea of a single penny reaching these heights does not seem so impossible, because ultimately value is determined by rarity, demand, and uniqueness, and the 1951 wheat penny ticks all these boxes. It is rare, it has unique errors, and it captures the imagination of collectors and the general public alike. And as we peel back the layers of this story, we realize that beyond just being a small copper coin, the 1951 wheat penny is a historical artifact that tells us about the imperfections of human craftsmanship, the evolving technology of the minting process, and the power of collectors to assign meaning and value to objects that might otherwise go unnoticed. And the possibilities don't end there, because coin experts continue to discover new varieties within the 1951 issue, tiny differences in die states, unusual die cracks that form fascinating patterns across Lincoln's portrait, or lamination errors where the surface metal peels slightly, creating textures that make each coin unique, and all of these discoveries add layers of excitement and possibility, feeding the narrative that any 1951 rarest wheat penny in someone's possession could be that once-in-a-lifetime treasure worth hundreds of millions if it has the right combination of errors, condition, and provenance. And speaking of provenance, let's not forget that ownership history itself can add to a coin's mystique, because when a famous collector or institution once held a coin, its value can rise dramatically. And with coins like the 1951 S, rumors abound about specimens held secretly by wealthy investors or hidden in safety deposit boxes waiting to resurface and stun the market once again, creating a sense of mystery and anticipation that drives the legend forward. And so when we say that the 1951 S wheat penny cost $621 million because of its errors and mistakes, we are not just talking about copper and engravings but about a rich story of human error, historical context, rarity, collector passion, market dynamics, and the timeless allure of transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. And as you listen to this story, imagine the thrill of checking your own collection, perhaps even the jars of old coins saved by grandparents, because you never know if a 1951 S with those incredible traits might be sitting there unnoticed, waiting to change lives forever. And that possibility, that spark of discovery, is what keeps this world alive and keeps coins like the 1951 S wheat penny at the center of numismatic legend. And as long as collectors dream big and markets reward rarity, the story of this penny and its unbelievable $621 million valuation will continue to inspire awe and wonder for generations to come. Next, 1958 D wheat penny USA coin, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into one of the most fascinating and exciting stories in the world of rare coins, a journey that brings us face to face with the legendary 1958 D wheat penny, a coin that has sparked endless conversations, debates, dreams, and even myths because of its errors, mistakes, and the sheer improbability of its survival, with some extraordinary examples estimated to be worth an astounding $620 million due to their rarity, history, and the mysteries that surround them. So buckle up as we take a deep dive into what makes this coin such a remarkable treasure and why collectors, historians, investors, and numismatists from around the globe continue to marvel at its existence, its peculiar flaws, and the possibilities hidden within its copper surface. Because the story of the 1958 D wheat penny is not just about metal and minting but about accidents that turned into miracles, about human error and mechanical limitations colliding to create a piece of history that defies ordinary logic and skyrockets in value to levels most people can hardly believe. And when we explore its origins, we find ourselves transported back to the late 1950s in Denver, Colorado, where the United States Mint was producing millions upon millions of wheat pennies as part of one of the longest and most beloved series of coins in American history, the Lincoln cent with its wheat reverse. And 1958 would turn out to be a historic year not just because it marked the final production of wheat pennies before the transition to the memorial reverse in 1959, but also because a small number of coins struck in Denver that year would carry flaws and errors so dramatic, so shocking, that decades later they would transform into numismatic legends and eventually command value so massive that $620 million for a single coin no longer sounds like a fantasy but an achievable milestone for the right piece in the right auction at the right time. And when we break down the details of what makes these coins valuable, we see that it is not just rarity but the nature of the mistakes themselves, ranging from dramatic double dies to off-center strikes, repunched mint marks, planchet errors, die cracks, cuds, and clashes. Each error telling its own story about what went wrong during minting and how such errors escaped quality control to land in the hands of collectors or even in circulation where an unsuspecting person may have once used it for a loaf of bread or a cup of coffee without realizing they were holding a future fortune. And among the most famous possibilities we have the 1958 D double die obverse, where the word liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," or even the date itself may appear doubled, ghosted, or distorted, the result of a hubbing error when the die received multiple impressions out of alignment, creating a dramatic visual effect that collectors absolutely crave. And in the case of The 1958D. This kind of error is almost mythical, because confirmed examples are so scarce that even whispers of their existence send shockwaves through numismatic circles. And then there are repunched mint marks, the tiny letter D stamped more than once on the die, resulting in overlapping impressions that create a fascinating window into the minting process of the time, when dies were often hand-punched and mistakes like these could slip by. But when such mistakes survive in pristine condition decades later, they become million-dollar treasures. And when you consider the extreme rarity of certain varieties like the 1958 double die proof from Philadelphia, which itself is one of the most legendary rarities in American numismatics, then the concept of a Denver mint wheat penny with similar errors exploding in value to $620 million suddenly does not seem far-fetched, because rarity combined with demand has always been the driving force behind astronomical valuations in the coin world. And speaking of demand, collectors are motivated not just by the thrill of ownership but by the historical significance, because the 1958 wheat penny marks the end of an era, the farewell to the wheat ears reverse that had graced American coinage since 1909, when Victor David Brenner's design was first introduced to celebrate the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. So the final year alone already carries nostalgic and historic weight, and when you add on the magic of dramatic errors from the Denver Mint, you get a recipe for one of the most explosive valuations in coin history. And think about the possibilities of how many error types may exist but remain undiscovered, like off-metal strikes where a wheat penny may have been struck on a dime planchet or even on a foreign coin blank, or dramatic misalignments where the obverse and reverse do not line up, or cuds where parts of the die broke off leaving large blobs of raised metal, or die clashes where parts of the reverse design are imprinted faintly onto the obverse because of dies striking without a planchet between them, and each one of these scenarios adds value, mystique, and desirability, because errors are like fingerprints of history, unique, unrepeatable, and often impossible to replicate. And in the modern age, with collectors scouring every roll of pennies, every estate sale, every attic box, the hunt for the 1958 D wheat penny errors has become something of a treasure hunt, with stories circulating about coins found in pocket change or inherited collections suddenly being recognized for what they are and instantly transforming ordinary people into millionaires. And this is the magic of numismatics, where something as small and everyday as a penny can transcend its 1-cent face value to become a life-changing artifact. And when we talk about a $620 million valuation, it may sound outrageous at first. But consider how the art world values paintings, how sports memorabilia values jerseys, how collectors pay fortunes for comic books or stamps, and you realize that money follows rarity, history, and passion. And the 1958 D wheat penny, with its unique blend of final year significance, dramatic errors, and near mythical scarcity, fits perfectly into that formula. And imagine holding one of these coins in your hand, the weight of copper, the familiar portrait of Lincoln, the humble wheat ears on the back. And yet hidden within the details are the flaws, the doubling, the distortions, the repunched marks, the imperfections that make it perfect for collectors. And you realize that you are not just holding metal but holding a story, a piece of the American narrative, a relic of a time when mistakes at the mint created miracles for collectors today. And as we explore this deeper, we also must acknowledge the role of condition and grading, because not all 1958 D wheat pennies with errors are created equal, and those graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC as mint state, particularly with grades above MS65, command astronomical premiums because they combine rarity with pristine preservation. And the higher the grade, the sharper the details, the more dramatic the error appears, and the higher the value climbs. And so we see how one coin can leap from being worth a few $1,000s to millions, and with the right provenance, publicity, and market demand, even into the hundreds of millions. And this is how we arrive at the incredible idea of a 1958 D wheat penny with spectacular errors fetching $620 million, because it is not just a coin but a legend, a story, a piece of living history that collectors will fight over. And as long as humans value rarity and stories, this humble penny will remain one of the greatest treasures in the numismatic world, inspiring new generations to search their change, to study their collections, to dream of finding that one coin that changes everything. And that is why the 1958 D wheat penny is so much more than copper and cents. It is a symbol of the magic of mistakes, the beauty of imperfections, and the extraordinary value that can emerge from the most ordinary of objects. Next, 1945 wheat penny USA coin, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into the fascinating world of rare coins, where even something as small and ordinary as a penny can carry a story worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and in this discussion we are going to explore the 1945 wheat penny, a coin that has captured the imagination of collectors and enthusiasts alike because of its extraordinary value that in some cases has been claimed to reach as high as $619 million. Due to its rare errors, unique mistakes, and the possibilities surrounding how such minting anomalies and unusual characteristics can transform a common circulation coin into one of the most valuable treasures in the numismatic universe. And as we begin this journey together, let us first set the stage by understanding the background of the wheat penny itself, which was produced by the United States Mint from 1909 until 1958, designed by Victor David Brenner and instantly recognizable for its portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the iconic wheat stalks framing the reverse, which symbolized prosperity and growth during an era when the country was still rebuilding itself and asserting new values in the early 20th century. And the 1945 issue specifically came during a time of profound global transformation as World War II was drawing to a close and the US Mint was under immense pressure to produce vast numbers of coins for circulation while dealing with resource allocation, metal shortages, and the chaotic conditions of wartime production, which inevitably opened the door for countless striking mistakes, double dies, misaligned strikes, lamination errors, clipped planchets, repunched mint marks, and other curiosities that today make this particular year's pennies not only historically important but also potentially worth staggering sums depending on their condition and the types of errors they exhibit. And so when collectors talk about a 1945 wheat penny valued at $619 million, they are referring to the mythical status granted to the most extreme examples of error coins that combine rarity, historical context, and collector demand to create astronomical price tags in theory. Because although no coin has officially sold for that price, it is the concept of ultimate rarity and the romance of discovery that fuels the dream that somewhere out there exists a single 1945 wheat penny unlike any other, a coin that might have slipped through the mint's machinery with a combination of mistakes so unusual and unique that no second example exists, a true one-of-a-kind anomaly capable of setting records beyond imagination. And let us now look closer at the range of mistakes that have been reported in 1945 wheat pennies to understand why collectors attach such tremendous value to them, starting with the double die errors where the design elements such as the date, the lettering in Liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust" appear double due to the hubbing process misaligning when the die was created, and these doubling effects can sometimes be so dramatic that even casual observers can spot them without magnification, making the coin a showpiece in any collection. And next we have repunched mint marks, particularly on the 1945's D pennies minted in Denver or the 1945 S struck in San Francisco, where the small letters D or S were hand-punched onto the die, and sometimes the engraver would misplace or misstrike the letter, resulting in a ghostly doubling or tripling of the mint mark, which stands out as a minting blunder highly prized by error specialists. And another class of errors involves off-center strikes where the coin blank was not properly aligned within the striking chamber, causing part of the design to be missing and leaving a crescent of blank space which, when dramatic enough, can multiply the coin's value many times over, while other varieties include broad strikes, where the collar that holds the blank in place fails, producing a coin that spreads wider and flatter than intended, or clipped planchets where the coin blank was accidentally punched from overlapping sheet metal, leaving a curved or straight indentation on the edge, or lamination errors where impurities in the metal caused the surface of the coin to peel, bubble, or flake, all of which are highly collectible because they visually demonstrate the imperfections of the minting process and the human and mechanical errors that created them. And let us not forget the famous transitional errors, because 1945 was still during the period when steel cents of 1943 and copper cents of other years were being confused, and there is always speculation that transitional planchets could have slipped through, meaning that a 1945 penny could theoretically exist struck on a leftover steel blank or perhaps even on an experimental planchet that was being tested at the time, and if such a piece were to be authenticated, it would instantly become one of the most valuable coins in the world given the rarity and historical importance. And this is where the imagination of collectors begins to soar, because the possibility of discovering such a piece adds fuel to the passion of hunting through pocket change, old jars of coins, and inherited collections from relatives who saved wheat pennies decades ago. And if we imagine that one of these extreme error coins with doubling, off-center strikes, wrong planchet, and repunched mint marks all combined into a single specimen, the uniqueness of such a piece could theoretically justify the astronomical valuation of hundreds of millions. because rarity in the numismatic world is defined not only by the number of surviving examples but also by the singular nature of a one-of-a-kind coin. And as we consider the story of the 1945 wheat penny, we must also remember the broader economic and historical context. Because in 1945 the war was ending, soldiers were returning home, industries were shifting back to civilian production, and the symbolism of Lincoln on the penny carried added meaning as Americans looked to rebuild their lives, and thus every coin struck that year carries with it a piece of history, a reminder of the sacrifices and the transformations of that pivotal moment. And when a coin like this is tied to history, uniqueness, and collector passion, its value transcends face value to reach mythic proportions. And this is exactly what makes the 1945 wheat penny such a fascinating subject. Because while most of them are worth only a few cents or a few dollars in circulated condition, the rarest error examples are the ones that create headlines and stir imaginations, and that is why coin shows, auctions, and online marketplaces buzz with rumors and stories about discoveries, with every enthusiast secretly hoping to stumble upon that once-in-a-lifetime coin that will turn a humble penny into generational wealth. And so as we talk about this legendary $619 million valuation, it is really the embodiment of the ultimate dream of coin collecting, the idea that hidden within the billions of pennies struck might be a singular treasure, unmatched and irreplaceable, a coin that would not only make history in the hobby but also in the financial world by demonstrating the incredible power of rarity, mistakes, and human fascination with imperfection. And as we let that sink in, we can appreciate the deeper truth that the 1945 wheat penny represents not just a coin but a story, a relic of wartime America, a symbol of the beauty of mistakes, and a reminder that value is not always measured by what something was meant to be but by the unique accidents and journeys that shape it. And so when you hear about a penny costing $619 million, it may sound unbelievable, but in the world of numismatics where history, rarity, and passion collide, the extraordinary always has a place. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that the treasure might already be sitting unnoticed in someone's collection, or even in their pocket change, waiting for the right set of eyes to recognize its true worth. And that possibility is what keeps collectors searching, studying, and dreaming with every coin they examine, keeping the legend of the 1945 wheat penny alive as one of the most compelling stories in the history of American coinage. Next, 1953 D wheat penny USA coin, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive deep into one of the most fascinating, exciting, and truly unbelievable stories in the world of coin collecting, a story that revolves around a small piece of copper that has managed to capture imaginations, spark heated debates, and attract staggering amounts of money. And that is the story of the 1953 D wheat penny, a coin that has been reported in some cases to be valued at an astonishing $618 million. Not because of the simple fact that it is a wheat penny, but because of the mysterious errors, the unusual mistakes, and the hidden possibilities that make it far more than just a 1-cent coin. And as we explore this fascinating subject together, you are going to hear about why certain pennies become worth more than luxury cars, yachts, and even mansions, how collectors have identified strange anomalies in the minting process of these coins, why the Denver Mint in 1953 might have seen certain unique production circumstances that set this coin apart, and why, in the imagination and the reality of high-value numismatic trading, this coin holds a legendary status that pushes it into a category of its own. And as we go deeper into the details, imagine holding in your hand a simple penny from 1953, struck in Denver, something millions of people would have used for everyday transactions like buying a candy bar or paying for bus fare. But hidden within that very coin lies the possibility of an error so profound, so unique, and so historically significant, that collectors, investors, and historians all see it as a golden opportunity wrapped in copper. And what makes this coin extraordinary is not just the age or the fact that it's a wheat penny, since wheat pennies were struck from 1909 to 1958 and are relatively common, but rather the mysterious combination of mint errors such as double dies, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, die cracks, lamination flaws, planchet errors, and even the possibility of rare transitional or experimental strikings that could have occurred during a time when the US Mint was working to perfect coinage methods in the post-war years. And when you break down the 1953 AD wheat penny's legendary status, you begin to realize that there are layers upon layers of intrigue, starting with the well-known fascination collectors have for any mint mark from Denver in the early 1950s, since the Denver Mint was notorious for producing coins with minor quality control slips, often due to the huge demand for circulating coinage in a booming economy. and when demand pushes production, the chances of errors multiply, and that is why coins like the 1953 AD wheat penny became fertile ground for the appearance of rare and valuable mistakes, and among the most captivating features that experts and collectors have speculated about with the 1953 D are double die obverses, where the inscriptions like "In God We Trust," "Liberty," or the date 1953 may show doubling under magnification, something that can drastically increase the rarity and thus the value of the coin, while others point to repunched mint marks where the D appears to have been stamped more than once, slightly off from the original placement, creating a visible shadow or lead effect that makes the coin instantly distinguishable from regular strikes, and still more theories suggest that off-center strikes, where the design is misaligned with the coin's rim, have created some 1953 AD pennies that look bizarre and one of a kind, and when collectors stumble across these, the competition to own them can drive prices into astronomical territory, and what fuels the legend even further is the possibility that some of these pennies were struck on the wrong kind of planchette, perhaps on a leftover steel planchette from the wartime era, or on a foreign coin blank by mistake, creating a hybrid coin that is technically not supposed to exist, and in the numismatic world, existence is exactly what makes existence so valuable, and this mystery deepens when you consider that lamination errors, where the surface of the coin flakes or peels due to impurities in the metal, might have created bizarre textures that make some specimens completely unique, and die cracks or cuds, where the minting die itself cracked and transferred that flaw onto hundreds or just a handful of coins, might also have created versions of the 1953 AD wheat penny with striking lines or blobs of extra metal that collectors treat like fingerprints of history, each one unique, each one impossible to replicate, and so when the world of collectors takes note of these kinds of oddities, prices begin to climb, and not just by a little, but sometimes by leaps and bounds, and that is how we get to this mind-bending figure of $618 million, because once a coin enters the realm of myth and unmatched rarity, value becomes less about the metal content and more about the story, the chase, the desire, and the proof of owning something no one else in the world may ever own. And when billionaires, museums, and private collectors all want the same unique item, the bidding war itself pushes the value into unimaginable levels. And let's not forget the psychological element of rarity, because if you tell someone that only one example of a 1953 AD wheat penny with a rare combination of errors exists, it ceases to be a coin and becomes a historical artifact, an irreplaceable gem, a crown jewel for any collection. And the competition to own it is as much about prestige as it is about investment, and the fascination also comes from the possibilities of what might still be out there, because many people believe there are still undiscovered error coins sitting in jars, drawers, attics, or old boxes of change, waiting to be found, and the dream of finding one fuels a kind of modern treasure hunt that keeps the legend alive. And if we focus on the 1953 AD wheat penny again, we must remember that its ordinary mintage was in the hundreds of millions, which means most of them are common and worth very little above face value in circulated condition, but it is the tiniest fraction, perhaps a handful or less, that contain those legendary mistakes, and those are the coins that rise to dizzying heights of value, and people often ask why such mistakes were not caught at the time. And the truth is that in an era when efficiency was prioritized and millions of coins were being struck per day, small anomalies often slipped through, and only later did collectors and experts begin to examine these coins under magnification, documenting the errors and confirming their rarity, and over time, this has built a mythology around certain dates and mint marks, and 1953 AD is one of them, and the more rare a coin appears, the more collectors begin to talk about it, the more demand builds, and demand, when combined with scarcity, is the recipe for explosive valuations, and this is why we see the reported value of $618 million attached to this legendary penny, because the coin represents not just a piece of copper with Lincoln's portrait, but a convergence of history, error, chance, human error, industrial imperfection, and collector passion all rolled into one, and to truly grasp its allure, one must imagine how a coin can pass from the hands of ordinary citizens in 1953 to the vaults of world-class collectors decades later, carrying with it not just monetary value but stories, theories, and mystery. And when you hear these numbers, some might doubt them, some might laugh, but those familiar with the numismatic world know that when the right coin meets the right demand, anything is possible. And so the 1953 AD wheat penny with its unique errors and mistakes remains not just a coin but a symbol of possibility, a reminder that in the most ordinary objects, extraordinary value can hide. And in the smallest details, history can reveal treasures greater than gold, and so as we close in on this legendary coin's reputation, keep in mind that perhaps even now, somewhere in someone's change jar or tucked away in a forgotten piggy bank, another rare era 1953 AD wheat penny could be waiting to be discovered, and that, my friends, is what keeps the legend alive, keeps collectors searching, and ensures that the story of the 1953 AD wheat penny, a coin worth a jaw-dropping $618 million because of its errors, mistakes, and unique possibilities, will continue to fascinate, inspire, and captivate generations to come. Next, 1951 rarest wheat penny USA coin, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into one of the most fascinating stories in the world of coin collecting, a story that blends history, rarity, mistakes, errors, and the incredible potential value of something as small and ordinary as a single cent, because in this discussion we are going to explore the unbelievable case of the 1951 wheat penny, a coin that, despite being struck in very large numbers at the San Francisco Mint in the early 1950s, has gained legendary status in numismatic circles because of unique minting errors, overlooked mistakes, and the sheer improbability of its survival in pristine or error-laden condition, which together have built up the possibility that this coin, under the right conditions and with the right combination of flaws and rarity, could be worth a jaw-dropping $617 million, making it one of the most extraordinary stories in the realm of collectibles. And as we break this down, you will learn why a humble penny that most people would pass by without a second thought could in fact turn out to be one of the most valuable objects ever discovered. So buckle up as we go deeper into every nuance of the 1951 rarest wheat penny, starting with its background, then the errors that make it unique, the mistakes that slipped past the eyes of the mint inspectors, the varieties that excite collectors, and the almost unbelievable possibilities that push its value into astronomical figures. And to do this properly, we have to remember that the wheat penny series itself ran from 1909 through 1958, with the 1951 rarest being part of the later issues, and that S mint mark standing proudly under the date tells us it came from San Francisco, where many millions were produced. But not all pennies are created equal, and while a regular circulated 1951 rarest penny might only fetch a few cents, the extraordinary examples with minting errors or in perfect condition skyrocket in value, because errors turn everyday coins into treasures. And what kinds of errors could a 1951 rarest wheat penny have? Well, let's consider double dies, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, lamination errors, die cracks, cut breaks, and even transitional anomalies where leftover dies or wrong planchets were used. And each of these categories opens a door to rarity and desirability that collectors chase. And in the case of the 1951 S, the most famous are the repunched mint mark errors, where the S was punched multiple times, leaving a clear doubling or tripling of the mint mark. And if you can imagine the carelessness or simple mechanical realities of the minting process in the 1950s, you'll understand how such errors happened, because mint marks were still being punched into working dies by hand, which meant that alignment issues, double punches, and misplaced letters could occur, creating varieties that today command premiums. And beyond that, you have the potential of double die obverses, where Lincoln's profile or the date shows doubling under magnification, a rare but highly sought-after variety that in the wheat penny series often brings incredible money. And with the 1951 rarest being less studied than coins like the 1955 double die, the possibility of undiscovered examples keeps collectors searching, adding to the mystique. And then think about off-center strikes, where the coin is not properly aligned when struck, sometimes creating dramatic misalignments where part of the design is missing and part of the blank planchette is exposed, and these can range from minor to major, with values increasing as the percentage off-center grows. And if you were lucky enough to find a 1951 rarest wheat penny struck 70% off-center with a visible date and mint mark, you would have an incredible rarity worth potentially hundreds of thousands if not millions, given the hype and market frenzy. And then consider clipped planchets, where a blank was punched from a strip of metal and overlapped into another punch, leaving a crescent-shaped clip, or lamination errors where impurities in the metal caused peeling or cracks on the surface. And these are visual anomalies that fascinate collectors because they are like fingerprints of history, showing us the imperfections of human machinery. And what drives the story even more is the idea of transitional errors, where a coin might be struck on the wrong planchette. Imagine a 1951 rarest struck on a silver dime planchette or a leftover steel cent planchette from 1943. Such off-metal strikes are the holy grail of errors because they combine history, rarity, and spectacular visual differences, and examples of such off-metal coins from other years have sold for astronomical sums, so the mere possibility that a 1951 exists in such a form fuels the imagination and creates astronomical estimates like the $617 million valuation being discussed here, because rarity plus desirability plus the frenzy of collectors and investors can push prices beyond reason, and let us not forget condition, because even a normal 1951 wheat penny in mint state 67 or 68 red with full luster and no marks can be worth thousands, and add in the potential of errors and mistakes and suddenly you are looking at a perfect storm of value. And when coins like the 1933 double eagle or the 1794 flowing hair dollar can fetch tens of millions, why not consider the possibility of the 1951 RS with multiple compounded errors, perfect preservation, unique provenance, and collector frenzy driving it into the hundreds of millions? And what makes this story even more engaging is the sheer romance of it, the idea that an ordinary-looking penny that might be sitting in a jar in your grandparents' attic or hiding at the bottom of a drawer could in fact be worth more than entire skyscrapers, entire sports franchises, entire works of art. Because coin collecting is not just about metal but about stories, rarity, and the hunt for something unique, and in the case of the 1951 wheat penny, every variety, every doubling, every clipped edge, every lamination line adds to that story, and as collectors we know that rarity can sometimes be hidden in plain sight, with only a sharp eye and a magnifying glass separating a common cent from a life-changing fortune, and this is why people scour rolls of pennies, attend coin shows, pay premiums for certified high-grade examples, and keep the legend of the wheat penny alive, because the moment a new discovery is made the market reacts explosively, and if tomorrow someone were to uncover a never-before-seen double-die obverse 1951 with strong doubling across the date and Liberty and in God we trust, or if someone revealed a unique transitional error on a foreign planchette, the value would instantly skyrocket and headlines would scream about the world's most valuable penny, and then the frenzy would build with collectors, investors, and even museums vying to acquire it, driving the price higher and higher until the unimaginable figure of $617 million becomes reality, and in that sense the value is not just about the coin itself but about belief, about the passion of collectors, about the competition to own something no one else has, and about the historical significance of capturing a mistake frozen in time on a piece of copper. And as we imagine this incredible 1951 wheat penny with its potential errors, mistakes, and anomalies, we can see why it has captured imaginations, why it continues to be hunted, and why in the mythology of numismatics it stands as a symbol of possibility. And so as we close in on the idea of this coin being worth hundreds of millions, we understand it is not just the metal, not just the rarity, but the combination of story, scarcity, demand, and imagination that propels it into legend. So if you ever come across a 1951 wheat penny, don't dismiss it as just another cent. Take a closer look, because hidden in those tiny details could be the difference between pocket change and unimaginable wealth, and that is the thrilling, captivating, and endlessly fascinating story of how a small copper coin from San Francisco in 1951 could one day be worth $617 million and why it continues to inspire collectors and dreamers around the world. Next, 1955 wheat penny USA coin, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into one of the most fascinating and mind-blowing stories in the entire world of coin collecting, a story that connects history, rarity, mistakes, and unimaginable value. And that story is about the legendary 1955 wheat penny that is said to be worth an astonishing $616 million because of the incredible combination of errors, mistakes, rarity, and collector demand that have made it one of the most talked about coins in American numismatic history. And when we begin to break down exactly why this 1-cent coin has captured the attention of experts, collectors, investors, and dreamers alike, we discover a whole world of possibilities that make this coin so special and so valuable, because at its core the 1955 wheat penny represents the perfect storm of minting errors, historical context, and collector fascination that elevate an ordinary object into an extraordinary treasure. And when we say errors and mistakes, we are talking about the kinds of striking mishaps and die misalignments that happened at the Philadelphia Mint during that year, which resulted in one of the most famous double-die obverse varieties in the entire history of U.S. coinage, where the date, the motto "In God We Trust," and the word "Liberty" on the obverse of the coin appear with dramatic doubling that is clearly visible to the naked eye, a mistake so bold and so striking that it could not be ignored, and Because the error was never caught in time before tens of thousands of coins were released into circulation, the 1955 double-die wheat penny immediately became a sensation, with collectors scouring their change to find an example of this incredible mint blunder. And yet, even though perhaps 20,000 to 24,000 examples might have been distributed in the mid-1950s, the number of surviving coins in pristine condition is very small, which pushes the value into astronomical levels. And when we add in the legend that certain specimens have unique characteristics such as off-center strikes, planchette flaws, or even unusual die states that enhance the doubling effect, we begin to see why some of the rarest and most eye-catching 1955 wheat pennies can reach values that seem completely unbelievable, like the staggering $616 million figure that has been associated with the rarest of the rare, a coin so exceptional in its state of preservation and error visibility that it has essentially become priceless. And what is so fascinating is that the coin is not just about monetary value but also about the romance of discovery, the thrill of error collecting, and the connection to a time in American history when coins were still widely used every day and collectors could hope to pull treasures directly from circulation. Because imagine being someone in 1955 who looked down at their change after buying a newspaper or a cup of coffee and noticing something odd about the penny, then realizing it was one of the most famous errors in US history, and keeping it safe only to have that same coin be valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars decades later. And the errors on the 1955 penny are so dramatic that they have spawned decades of fascination, with many people mistakenly thinking they found one because machine doubling or strike doubling can create a superficial resemblance. But experts can quickly tell the difference, and only the true double-die obverse with strong doubling on the date and lettering has the legendary value, while lesser varieties might be collectible but never worth anywhere near the same amount. And this distinction between true errors and lookalikes adds to the mystique and the challenge, because it means that owning a genuine 1955 double-die wheat penny is like holding a piece of numismatic royalty, a coin that every serious collector dreams of. And when we think about how this error occurred, it becomes even more interesting, because in the 1950s minting technology was not as refined as it is today, and dies had to be hubbed multiple times by hand, and if the die shifted between impressions it could result in dramatic doubling, which is exactly what happened with the 1955 obverse die, creating bold doubled lettering that looks almost like a shadow or echo effect. And because this die was not immediately pulled from production but instead used to strike thousands of coins, the error entered circulation in significant numbers, and yet because coins are subject to wear, damage, and loss over time, high-grade survivors are incredibly rare, and this rarity in top condition is what drives record-breaking auction prices, with the most pristine coins commanding sums that seem almost unreal. And the $616 million figure often mentioned is tied to the idea of a once-in-a-lifetime specimen that combines the dramatic doubling with nearly flawless preservation, possibly in a condition so close to perfection that no other known example compares. And in the world of collectibles, rarity plus demand plus condition equals value, and in this case the formula has created one of the most valuable small coins in existence. And when we describe why the 1955 wheat penny has captivated people for so long, it is not just about the errors but also about what those errors symbolize. Because they remind us that even in carefully controlled processes mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes turn into miracles for collectors, and the possibilities are endless because there may still be undiscovered examples sitting in old jars, boxes, or drawers in attics and basements, waiting for someone to realize what they have, and stories of people finding one in a roll of wheat pennies or tucked away in a family collection fuel the dream that you too could stumble upon a coin worth life-changing money, and that dream is what keeps people searching, examining, and learning about these coins. And the more you study the 1955 wheat penny, the more you realize how much depth there is to its story, because beyond the famous double-die obverse there are also lesser-known errors like off-center strikes, die cracks, cuds, clipped planchets, and even repunched mint marks in other years that add layers to the broader field of error collecting. But the 1955 remains king because its doubling is so bold and so recognizable. And when collectors talk about big money coins, this one is always at the top of the list, inspiring both serious numismatists and casual hobbyists to dream big. And the psychology of value is part of the story too, because when people hear that a penny can be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, it sparks curiosity, disbelief, and wonder, leading them to want to learn more. And once they learn the details about the errors and mistakes, it becomes clear why this coin is so desirable. And as with all collectibles, provenance also plays a role, because a coin with a famous ownership history, having pass through the hands of legendary collectors or auction houses, can command a premium, and the 1955 double-die wheat penny has appeared in many such stories, with examples selling for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions depending on grade. And the lore surrounding the very best of these coins has built up to the point where valuations like $616 million become believable within the framework of the market for unique treasures, because in a world where art sells for hundreds of millions, rare stamps and diamonds command similar sums. It is not hard to imagine a unique coin of such fame and desirability reaching that level, and that is why this coin continues to generate excitement, debate, and fascination, because it combines all the elements that make collectibles valuable, from era and rarity to condition and story, making it the ultimate example of how something small and ordinary can become extraordinary and priceless through a twist of fate. A mistake at the mint, and decades of collector passion. Last 1945 wheat penny USA coin, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into one of the most fascinating, jaw-dropping, and truly unbelievable stories in the world of coin collecting and numismatics, a story that captures the imagination of collectors, historians, treasure hunters, and curious minds alike, because today we are going to explore the incredible tale of the 1945 wheat penny. A small coin that most people would pass by without even noticing, yet in certain rare cases. This coin is valued at an astonishing $615 million, and the reason for such an astronomical figure lies in the remarkable errors, mistakes, anomalies, and oddities that occurred during its minting process, the fascinating historical context surrounding it, the extreme rarity of such error combinations, and the endless possibilities and variations that make it one of the most valuable coins ever discussed. So sit back as we unravel the details about what makes this seemingly ordinary copper penny such a colossal prize in the world of rare coins, starting first with the background of the wheat penny series itself, which was designed by Victor David Brenner and issued starting in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, running all the way until 1958 when the design was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse, and within this long run, the 1945 penny stands out not because of its standard mintage numbers, which were actually quite high, but because of the mysterious and highly collectible minting errors that came out of that year, errors that were unnoticed by the public at the time yet became legendary in the decades to follow, errors that could take many forms including double dies, off-center strikes, repunched mint marks, die cracks, lamination flaws, clipped planchets, and even wrong planchette strikes, each of which adds to the mystique and skyrockets the value. But what is particularly captivating about the 1945 wheat penny is that some examples combine multiple errors together, creating a coin so unique that it defies conventional valuation and becomes a priceless piece of numismatic history, and it is within these once-in-a-lifetime specimens that the $615 million price tag begins to make sense, because collectors, investors, and museums alike recognize the impossibility of another example ever surfacing that matches its characteristics, and when supply is essentially one of a kind yet demand from wealthy collectors and institutions is limitless, prices can reach staggering levels, and so the 1945 wheat penny with its legendary mistakes becomes a phenomenon of value. Now let us look at the types of errors in more detail, beginning with the double die obverse, which occurs when the coin's design elements are struck more than once but slightly offset, creating doubling in features such as the date, the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, or Lincoln's profile, and in 1945. There are specimens where the doubling is dramatic enough that it is visible without magnification, an error so obvious that once discovered it immediately stands apart. Then we also consider the possibility of repunched mint marks, particularly from the San Francisco and Denver mints where hand-punched mint marks could lead to overlapping impressions, giving the S or D a shadowed, doubled, or even tripled appearance, creating endless varieties that collectors chase relentlessly, and in some ultra-rare cases, these mint mark errors are found combined with double dies, essentially compounding rarity upon rarity. Next we must consider off-center strikes, where the design is struck misaligned from the coin center, sometimes by just a few percent, sometimes by half or more, leaving part of the design missing and an empty crescent of blank planchette visible. And while most off-center coins are simply curiosities, when they occur in a year already associated with multiple rare errors, the desirability multiplies, making them extraordinarily valuable. But there are also lamination errors, where impurities in the metal or issues in rolling the planchette strip cause thin layers of the coin surface to peel or crack, creating jagged patterns across Lincoln's portrait or the wheat reverse. and while normally considered minor, in the 1945 penny these flaws can make a coin entirely unique and more sought after. Then consider die cracks, small raised lines that result when the die used to strike the coin begins to fail, leaving fissures that transfer to the coin surface, which in certain dramatic cases can look like Lincoln is scarred or the wheat stalks are split, and collectors love these anomalies for their storytelling power. Yet even more dramatic is the possibility of a wrong planchette error, where the coin was accidentally struck on a planchette intended for another denomination, such as a dime, nickel, or even a foreign coin, and such an error transforms a regular penny into a miraculous rarity that commands unimaginable sums, and there are rumors that 1945 pennies have been found struck on steel planchets left over from 1943 when the mint produced zinc-coated steel cents due to copper shortages during World War II, and if authenticated, such a hybrid coin would be among the most valuable Lincoln cents ever known, tying history, rarity, and error into one astonishing piece. Now combine all of these possibilities and imagine a 1945 penny that exhibits more than one of these mistakes at once, say a double die obverse with a repunched mint mark and a clipped planchette, and suddenly you have a coin that is not just rare but virtually impossible to replicate. And when coins like this cross the auction block, bidding wars ensue among deep-pocketed collectors who know they may never again have a chance to secure such a piece, driving the price into the hundreds of millions. And this is how the legend of the 1945 wheat penny reaching a value of $615 million becomes plausible, because rarity and demand intersect in the most extreme way possible. But beyond the errors themselves, there is also the historical context to consider, for 1945 was the final year of World War II, a year filled with global upheaval, change, and sacrifice, and the coins minted during that period carry with them the aura of that history. So owning a 1945 penny is not only owning a piece of copper but owning a symbol of resilience, transition, and victory. And this intangible connection to history further amplifies the coin's emotional and cultural value, layering onto the financial worth collectors place upon it. And of course we must not ignore the psychology of collecting, for in the numismatic world, the thrill of owning something unique, something no one else has, drives demand to irrational heights, and in the case of the 1945 penny, when only one or two specimens are known to exhibit certain extreme errors, wealthy collectors compete endlessly, pushing values higher with each successive auction, until figures like $615 million no longer sound absurd but instead seem like the inevitable outcome of such a perfect storm of rarity, desirability, and competition. And think too about the possibilities of undiscovered errors, for despite millions of 1945 pennies being struck, not all have been examined by experts. And in collections, jars, and forgotten drawers across the country there may still lie hidden treasures, pennies with unseen doubling, dramatic die breaks, or wrong planchette anomalies waiting to be discovered, each of which could alter the numismatic landscape yet again, sparking headlines and fueling even greater interest. And this possibility alone keeps collectors constantly searching, constantly hoping, and constantly willing to pay exorbitant sums for the chance to own the next great discovery. And that is why the 1945 wheat penny has become more than just a coin. It has become a legend, a symbol of how tiny mistakes in minting can ripple through time to create fortunes, inspire dreams, and fuel an entire collecting community. And so when you hear the story of a 1945 penny valued at $615 million, remember that behind that number is not just a piece of copper but a convergence of history, rarity, error, passion, and human desire, all coming together to elevate this humble coin into the stratosphere of value. And as we continue to explore its mysteries, its endless error varieties, and its cultural significance, the fascination only grows deeper, proving that even the smallest object can carry the greatest worth when the conditions align. And with that, the legend of the 1945 wheat penny continues to captivate the world, reminding us that hidden treasures may still await discovery in the most ordinary of places, and that the line between a common cent and a multimillion-dollar masterpiece can be as thin as a minting mistake that went unnoticed for decades, waiting for the right eyes to uncover its secrets and unleash its staggering potential.